The Christmas Truce by Aron Shepard.
My dear sister Janet, it's 2 in the morning and most men are asleep in their dugouts. Yet, I couldn't sleep before writing to you of the wonderful events of Christmas Eve. Honestly, what happened seems almost like a fairy tale, and if I hadn't seen it myself, I would hardly believe it. Just imagine, while you sang carols before the fire there in London, I did the same with enemy soldiers here on the battlefields of France. As I wrote to you before, there has been some serious fighting between our armies lately, so we've mostly stayed in our trenches and waited. The rain has fallen almost daily. It collects right in our trenches. The rain has brought mud, which sprays and coats everything and constantly sucks at our boots. We couldn't help feeling curious about the German soldiers across the way. After all, they faced the same dangers we did and worked hard in the same muck. Their first trench was only 50 yards from ours. Between us lay no man's land, bordered on both sides by barbed wire. Being close enough, we sometimes heard their voices. Just yesterday morning, Christmas Eve day, we had our first good snowfall. Everything was covered with white frost, while a bright sun shone all over. It was the perfect Christmas weather. During the day, there was little firing from either side. As darkness fell on Christmas Eve, the shooting stopped entirely. Our first complete silence in months. We hoped it would become a peaceful holiday, but we'd been told the Germans might attack and try to catch us off guard. I went to the dugout to rest and must have fallen asleep. My friend John woke me up suddenly, saying, "Come and see what the Germans are doing." I took my rifle and stuck my head carefully above the sandbags. I have yet to see a stranger and lovelier sight. Bunches of tiny lights were shining all along the German line, as far as the eye could see. "What is it?" I asked in confusion, and John answered, "Christmas trees." The Germans had placed Christmas trees in front of their trenches, lit by candle or lantern like beacons of goodwill. Then we heard their voices raised in song. Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht. This carol may not yet be familiar to us in Britain, but John knew it and translated, Silent Night, Holy Night. I have never heard one lovelier or more meaningful in that quiet, clear night. The men in our trenches clapped. Yes, British soldiers praising Germans. Then one of our own men started singing, and we all joined in. The first Noel, the angel did say. Honestly, we did not sound nearly as good as the Germans, but they answered with excited applause. Then we sang a few more songs. British and Germans singing in harmony across no man's land. I would have thought nothing could be more amazing. But what came next was more so. "English! Come over!" We heard one of them shout. "You no shoot! We no shoot!" We looked at each other in surprise. Then one of us shouted jokingly, "You come over here!" To our astonishment, we saw 2 figures rise from the trench, climb over their barbed wire and come forward without weapons across no man's land. One of them called, "Send officer to talk!" I saw one of our men lift his rifle, but our captain called out, "Hold your fire!" Then he climbed out and went to meet the Germans halfway. A few minutes later, the captain came back. "We've agreed there'll be no shooting before midnight tomorrow," he announced. we could see groups of 2 or 3 men coming towards us. Then some of us were climbing out too. And there we were in no man's land, over 100 soldiers and officers of each side, shaking hands with men who were supposed to be our enemy. Soon, a bonfire was built, and around it we mingled. Only a few of us knew German, but more of the Germans knew English. I asked one of them why that was. "Because many have worked in England," he said. "Before all this, I was a waiter at Hotel Cecil." Another German had been a porter at Victoria Station. He showed me a picture of his family back in Munich. I told him I should like to meet them someday. He smiled and gave me his family's address. Even those who couldn't converse could still exchange gifts. Badges and buttons from uniforms were gifted, and one of our boys walked off with a spiked helmet. I myself exchanged a jackknife for a leather equipment belt, a fine souvenir. These aren't the savage barbarians we've read so much about. They are men with homes and families, hopes and fears, principles, and yes, love of country. Men like ourselves. Why are we led to believe otherwise? As it grew late, we parted with promises to meet again the next day, and even some talk of a football match. I was just starting back to the trenches when an older German clutched my arm. "My God," he said, "why cannot we have peace and all go home?" I told him gently, "That you must ask your emperor." He looked at me, then said, "Perhaps, my friend, but also we must ask our hearts." So, dear sister, tell me, has there ever been such a Christmas Eve in history? What does it all mean, this impossible befriending of enemies? For the fighting here, of course nothing will change. Those soldiers will follow orders and we do the same. Still, it would be nice if the nations of the world act in the manner in which the soldiers did. Of course, disputes will always arise. But what if our leaders were to offer well wishes in place of warnings, songs in place of slurs? Would not all war end at once? All nations say they want peace. Yet, on this Christmas morning, I wonder if we want it quite enough. Your loving brother, Tom.